Hello and welcome to Sunday worship with for and from St Catherine's. Some of us have worshipped in the church today, others of us are worshipping here on WhatsApp this afternoon. And if you're joining me live, then thank you for your company. If you're picking this up further down the line, then you're just as welcome. We're looking this month at new beginnings, some different stories, some different insights from the Bible about making a fresh start, a new start. It's the beginning of a new academic year. My son headed off to university today. He's having a fresh start after months stuck at home with the old man. And we're all in this strange COVID world. We're all having to make new starts and fresh starts and doing things differently. So what can we learn? What do the wonderful ancient saints of the Bible have to show us, to tell us, to help us with? And today we're going to look at the story of Daniel. And more broadly, at the story that Daniel's story is a tiny part of, the story of the Jewish exile. Hundreds of thousands of Jewish people carted 1,000 miles plus from their homes in Jerusalem to a life of slavery and forced labour in Babylon. What was all that about? What can we learn from that? Well, let's see as we go. To start with, join me for our opening prayer. And so to our reading, which comes from the beginning of the book of Daniel. Much of the Old Testament, not all, but much of the Old Testament is set in what we think of now as the land of Israel. They didn't call it Israel in those days. Well, part of it they called Israel, but we won't get into that. Anyway, at this point of the story, however, the set has changed. The scene has changed. We're no longer in Israel. We're no longer anywhere near Israel, but we're in what is nowadays Iraq, in the ancient and very opulent and successful city of Babylon. And the setting in the city of Babylon is a royal palace. Here we go. Then the king commanded his palace master, Ashpenaz, to bring some of the Israelites of the royal family and of the nobility, young men without physical defect and handsome, versed in every branch of wisdom, endowed with knowledge and insight, and competent to serve in the king's palace. They were to be taught the literature and the language of the Chaldeans. The king assigned to them a daily portion of royal rations of food and wine. They were to be educated for 3 years, so that at the end of that time they could be stationed in the king's court. But Daniel resolved that he wouldn't defile himself with the royal rations of food and wine, so he asked the palace master to allow him not to defile himself. Now, God allowed Daniel to receive favour and compassion from the palace master. And the palace master said to Daniel, "I'm afraid of my lord the king. He's appointed your food and your drink. If he should see you in poorer condition than the other young men your age, you would endanger my head with the king." Then Daniel asked the guard whom the palace master had appointed over him, "Please test your servants for 10 days. Let us be given vegetables to eat and water to drink. You can then compare our appearance with the appearance of the young men who eat the royal rations, and deal with your servants according to what you observe." So he agreed to this proposal and tested them for 10 days. At the end of 10 days, it was observed that they appeared better and fatter than all the young men who'd been eating the royal food. So the guard continued to withdraw their royal rations and the wine they were to drink, and gave them vegetables. You may have noticed that I've changed your view. I've changed my view too. I've turned the camera around. You are now looking at what I'm normally looking at, and I'm looking at what you're normally looking at. Up there for me is the boat with the red sail and the big waves, and you get a lovely view of a dying spider plant, a white piano with pictures on. That's my normal view. God gave the Jews a new view, a new perspective. One of the things with this is if you look at something for long enough, you just get used to it. You may have had that experience of moving into a new house and thinking, oh, that room really needs redecorating. But then a few months down the line, a few years down the line, you just get used to it. You don't notice that shabby carpet with that awful paint colour any longer, and it just stays there for years. And we do that. We get used to our environment. And when we get used to our environment, we stop really engaging with it. That can happen in church. That you start going along to church in order to engage with God, but you get caught up in this, and you're in the church council, or you're in the rota for this, or you're organising that. And without really noticing it, little bit by little bit, church stops being a place where you encounter God, and it just becomes a place where you're busy. So every now and then, God needs to shift us. Every now and then he needs to pick us up and put us down somewhere else and say, hang on, now look from this perspective. And that's what he did to the ancient Jews. They'd got used to it. They had the temple. They'd had the temple for hundreds of years. They had all the rituals of the temple, rituals founded by Moses and passed down through the generation. They had lots of that stuff, which was designed to point them towards God. But they'd got so used to it, they weren't seeing God any longer. They were just seeing the stuff. And so God picked them up and he put them back down again, over 1,000 miles away in Babylon. And there they learnt to relate to God again. Now, I think we need to do that from time to time. God does that to us from time to time. And there's a sense in which COVID is that. Not at all suggesting that God has sent COVID in order to sort St. Catherine's out. I'm sure he hasn't. But COVID has forced us to see things differently. It's forced us to see our faith without going to church, because we couldn't go to church for months and some of us still can't. It's forced us to change our routines. It's forced us to change our relationships. It's forced us to change our working patterns. It's forced us to change our shopping patterns. All sorts of things have changed. And I hope that we can use that change to see what really matters. Daniel wanted to be sure to hold on to his relationship to God. How is he going to do that? He was being re-educated in new languages, new literature, new history, new perspectives, new ideas. He was expected to take on the way of thinking of the Chaldeans amongst whom he was now living. But he didn't want to lose his connection with God, and he chose the food. He chose to not eat their food, because his own food from his own culture was something that reminded him of God. Food was the thing for Daniel. This isn't a passage telling us we should all be vegetarians and drink only water, but it is a passage that says we need to know what it is we have to hold on to that keeps us focused on God and not distracted by our surroundings. What is that for you? What, in this new strange world of the COVID era, is something that holds you to your relationship with God and your commitments under God? To have something in particular worked well for Daniel, it might well work well for you and me. I'm quite sure that as the ancient Israelites were carted off in chains from their ancestral home in Jerusalem and force marched hundreds and hundreds of miles to a strange city, I'm sure that it didn't feel like a blessing to them. It felt to them like it was a disaster. What they were aware of at that point was all that they'd lost. They'd lost their homes, they'd lost their livelihoods, they'd lost their freedom, they'd lost their temple, they'd lost their religion. All of that was stripped away. But in retrospect, what we can see is that it was indeed a blessing. In Babylon, they wrote the Old Testament. In Babylon, they rediscovered the core of their calling as a people to be God's people. Babylon was a blessing to them. And for us, I think it's really important that we don't just look at what we've lost through COVID. Let's also attend to what we might be gaining. Join me in Jesus' prayer. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. As our Sunday worship draws to a close, it comes to that bit where I raise a glass in toast and honour to God and encourage you to do the same thing. We can't share communion when we're worshipping at home, but we can toast God. And the ancient Jews, well, the modern Jews, have a strong tradition of toasting God. I think it's an excellent thing to do. And as you know, each Sunday I try to think, well, what's a relevant toast? Well, today the theme has been very much about God giving us a new perspective, God showing us something we haven't seen before, which we can benefit from, even if it doesn't quite seem what we wanted. So I have dug this out from the back of my drinks cabinet. It has a long history, and I'm not going to bore you with it, but there's reasons why this is at the back of my drinks cabinet, and I have never drunk it. I don't know who it was who drank that much and then stopped. It was a very long time ago. It might have gone completely off, but I thought, well, the theme is about trying something new and having a new perspective, so I'm going to try something new. It's cherry brandy. It smells okay. It's got to be, I think, at least as old as I am. It's a bit brown. We shall see. Anyway, in the interests of always approaching God afresh, or at least from time to time approaching God afresh, I raise this glass of ancient cherry brandy to God in my thanks and my praise to him. And I encourage you to do something with something in the comfort of your own home. To our wonderful Heavenly Father, who is still with us, even when it all seems very strange and very unfamiliar, because all the universe is his. To him be praise. It might take some getting used to. We'll see how we go. A prayer of blessing. May God bless you and keep you. May he make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May he look kindly on you and give you peace. Today and every day, may God bless you.